Good morning. Thank you for coming. My name is Judy Wood. I have the pleasure of being president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson. And we want to celebrate that 99 years ago this month, the League of Women Voters was formed. And that is the same year we got the right to vote. And as a part of our celebration, we in Tucson, the Greater Tucson League of Women Voters, have decided to have a series of storytelling salons, hearing from our members about their history with the League. This is the initial event, and we hope to have many more. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate Stewart, the head of our 2020 Celebration Committee, and she will introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. So thanks for coming. This was actually all Judy's idea, so I just want to be clear. I have a little bit of experience in my professional life with oral history projects. I'm a historian. I'm also an archivist. I work at the Arizona Historical Society. And a few people from the League recently had donated some papers, a collection of office material from our local league. And I've been going through that at work to see what is in here. It's stuff like newsletters, meeting minutes, lots of interesting stuff, but it only tells one side of the story. It tells the official story, whereas when you talk to people, when you're a new member, you get to know the older members or the ones who've been here a long time. You start to hear some really interesting stories of what happened before. And so that's one reason that we're doing this, is to collect that other side of the story. And also just to add more to what do we know about women in Arizona and in Tucson specifically. What is their history and how they contributed to our public life. And another reason that we wanted to do this is our league has had a recent explosion in growth. Ever since the 2016 election, we've had, as Karen, our membership chair, knows, a whole lot of new members who are trying to figure some things out, trying to figure out how to be involved, how to be active, how to make a difference. And those of us who, like me, are pretty new. I moved to Tucson pretty recently and joined pretty recently in the last year or so. One of the reasons we do this is I just want to know, like what have other people done? What can I learn from people who've done this all before? Okay, so now I can turn to our panelists who, they were all chosen because they have all been past presidents of our local league and have a lot of experience. So that's kind of one of our themes for today. So I'm going to start with Carol Shearer, who, let's see, she has been, her professional life, she's been involved in the health insurance field. She came to Tucson in 1984, is that right?
87.
Oh, 87, sorry. She was president of our local league in 2000 to 2002, so for 2 full years by herself. And then the next year after that, she was co-president with Sally Davenport at the end. So they got to share those duties. She's been involved in lots of committees and lots of projects over the years, including the Environmental Issues Committee. She helped start this annual event that we do called Running and Winning. She's also been involved in development and fundraising. So she's been a member for 35 years of our local league. Next we have Shirley Sandelands, who's been her professional life, she was a high school teacher in suburban Chicago. And she got involved in her local teachers union, the NEA chapter. And she eventually became president of that chapter and was involved with the state group, went to the Illinois state legislature to lobby there. So that was what she was doing in Illinois. Then she moved to Tucson in 2001, then got involved in the league, became president in 2004 to 2006, and then was co-president with Noel Rodriguez the next 2 years. She's also president of our state league, our League of Women Voters of Arizona state group, and she's been a member for 18 years. Then we have Sally Davenport, who taught political science at several colleges, and she moved to Tucson in 1994. And she's been involved in lots of other organizations organizations beside the League, including Habitat for Humanity, the Casa Maria Soup Kitchen, and the International Resettlement of Sudanese Refugees. So she joined the League of Women Voters when she moved here in 1994. And the first thing she did was they asked her to be voter services chair. And she realized that involves a lot. So she's done a lot of things like helped write the voter guide, she's planned candidate forums, and she was co-president of the League with Carol in 2002 and 2003. So she's been a member for 25 years. And if you've been counting up all of that time, we have 78 years of membership up on this stage, which is really impressive. So first question that I have is really, how did you hear about the League? Why did you want to join? How did that start for you? Carol?
Well, Betsy Dukowski, who is a longtime member, was my neighbor. And I had never belonged to a league before, and I met her. Our husbands had met in the wash, hauling rocks or something. And Betsy said whenever she moved to a new town, she always joined the League of Women Voters because that way you got to know everybody in town. And by God, she was right.
You're going down the line?
Yes, we're going down the line. Your turn.
Okay, I moved to Tucson after I had retired, and therefore I didn't have a working group that I knew. So the first thing I actually did was call the Teachers Association office here and ask if they had a retired teachers group. And they said yes, and I said that I was a retired teacher from Illinois, and whomever I talked to unfortunately said to me, well, you can't join. So I didn't. And later, you know, I met other people who said that was really completely wrong. And I was at a church dinner, and I said, the politics is so crazy, I really don't understand it. And Sharon Deli, who was a past president, said to me, you should join the League of Women Voters. And I thought, well, I really should. I know about the League. I've talked to the League in Illinois. I just didn't belong because I was busy with other things. And therefore, I joined by PayPal. And then I got an invitation to an orientation meeting. And I got there, and the person in charge didn't have a name tag and said, oh, you're not a member. But nevertheless, I said, yes, I am a member. And I started going to meetings. And I do see that the next year I'm in the membership book as co-legislative person, which I really don't remember doing much about that at all. But we should go to the next person.
Sally. Well, I taught political science for many years and retired in 1994. I was teaching in Oregon at the time, and my husband and I looked around for a sunny place because we had forgotten what the sun was like, actually. So we moved to Tucson, and I really wanted to keep in touch with government and politics and all that, but I'm not a crusader type about any particular issue. And that's, most of the organizations around are supporting some kind of policy area. And I wanted to really work on good government. And do you know how many organizations there are around that are devoted to good government? And our grassroots, the League of Women Voters, is about the only one out there. I think Common Cause is doing some work, but it's not as grassroots as the League. So I immediately saw the League as a place, a beautiful fit for me. And it was, you know, it's never been disappointing in that regard. I think people know our reputation as being nonpartisan, or trying to be as much as we can nonpartisan, and really being interested in the system, making democracy work. That's a really unique thing for an organization, I think. If you know of any others, let me know.
Great. So a lot of new members, they first come to the League because they're really interested in voter registration. That's what they want to do. That's what they want to be trained to do. And it's a very important thing that we do. So I wanted to know, what are your experiences with that? Do you have any memories of voter registration or being involved in that in your early years, I guess?
Well, when I first became president of the league, we had so many forums going on that I finally made a calendar for the board. Some days we'd have like 3 forums. People were just, it was amazing. And well, Jenny McGeer, some of you may know, was very involved, and she would set up some of these forums. So I've done surveys over the years with the league about what member interests are, and it always is voter service and education.
Voter service, I inherited the voter service chair that had been the year before, Victor Bowleg, and he continued to chair that. It seemed to me that he had a big committee that if we had 2 requests for a night or a day and needed to set up a table, I was the last resort when I was president. He would always call and say, okay, we don't have anybody in this one. It would be the next day. So I got involved doing voter registration that way, and I always kept forms in the trunk of my car, because I could always, when anyone came to me and said, we need this, we're going to go do voter registration at maybe an assisted living place or something, I would be able to give them the forms that they needed. I did it quite a bit, but it wasn't the primary thing I did, because actually I was here 1 year and I became president the next year, and there were many other things to do.
Well, my experience with voter registration, I've always been interested in education about this stuff. And I really felt, even from the very beginning, that people may be intimidated and not registering to vote and not voting because they may not even know how to do it. They're scared to even walk in that door. And I may be wrong about that, but I don't think so, because we have a little story about this. I don't know who else was involved in this. I don't remember, except Ann Rodriguez, who is our county recorder in Pima County, said, this is a great idea, and I think you're right, let's do something. So we started to hold these kind of mock registration and voting sessions for people in libraries. Excuse me. And we would advertise them as, do you know how to register to vote? Do you know how to vote? Come in and look at a ballot with us, and we'll take you through, we'll walk you through. So don't ever be intimidated by the regular process. So we had our little tables in the library, and I remember one day Ann Rodriguez and I were sitting there. And one of the, most people went through and said, oh, thank you, thank you. One gentleman walked in, and we started out telling him how to register to vote. Okay, you put your name, you put your address here, and there were questions about what numbers and license plate. And then we say, well, would you put your party right there? And he said to me, what's a party? Okay, now that, I was just saying, yes, we are solving some purpose here, because where else would he go? How could he register and get that kind of information unless people were really trying to get it down to the simplest level? So that's my story about voter registration. I still think that's a problem with a lot of people. And I think the league is out there trying to address that issue too.
We did that process in a couple of high schools also. We did it on the Tohono Reservation at the high school there. Sally and I went, and someone from Ann Rodriguez's office, and we let them all go through and show them how to register. So they would not be intimidated when they got their time to, they wanted to know, what do we do if we go in with our card, and what do we do? So we gave them all ballots and let them go through the process. And I think that always something good that can be done in schools.
I didn't finish that story. I need to finish that when he asked what a party was, man, I'm saying, okay, think fast. When you're up here talking about all these issues and you don't understand how to explain it in simple terms, so I threw it to Ann. I said, oh, you have a county recorder here. She knows exactly what a party is. It's a good thing you asked that question. And Ann is going, let's see, what's the party? You can explain it, but trying to explain why it's needed and how it developed, it's difficult. These simple things are not so easy to explain simply.
It's a terrific story. Okay, so each of you have been involved in some specific activities and committees, so we'll talk a little bit about those that are, I think, probably your favorite things you've been involved in. So Carol's been involved in the environmental committee. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, when I was president, we didn't have the environmental committee. That's our new committee, but I'll be happy to tell you about it. We have a program on March the 16th, a voter education program, and it'll be at the downtown library. The title right now is Climate Change in Arizona, What Can and Should We Do? And our speakers are going to be Dr. Diana Liverman, who's the Regents Professor of Geography and Development, and the former co-director of the Institute of the Environment at the university, Kathy Jacobs, the director of the Center for the Climate Adaptation, Science and Solutions at the university, and Edward Bayshore, who is the co-leader of the Citizen Climate Lobby. So I encourage everybody to come.
Give me stories about, or what you've been doing the past few years, the committee.
Well, the committee, we formed the committee in 2017 to update our air quality position, and we've done that. And so now we are, I'm hoping that we'll be able to sponsor be one of the sponsors of some legislation, or not sponsored, but one of the supporters of some legislation that's being proposed at the state level right now, but we have a few processes to go through. So I have 30-some people on the list I send information to, but our committee meetings are actually, Betsy Bowling is the reason I got involved in that committee. Right, Betsy? Anyway, we usually have 10 or 12 people at the meeting. I'm hoping that we'll get more people involved, because I think climate change is probably one of our biggest issues for our current day. So,
one of the projects Carol Shearer really started was the Running and Winning workshop we have been doing at a high school since 2004, and that was a workshop explanation in a binder that was given to us by the Camden, New Jersey League of Women Voters, by one of their members here, and came with her husband to the gem show and called Carol, and Carol started that when she was president, and then it continued on, and it still continues to this day. So maybe you should say something.
Well, Shirley should talk about that, because you've done much of the work over the years. We still see the woman. In fact, we're going to have dinner with her on Monday night, Renee Robbins. She comes to the gym show, and we still talk to her. And
if you don't know, we bring in elected women to talk in small groups to the girls in a high school. We choose a high school, can only do one a year, because you have to plan. You have to have elected women there, whether they're school board members, city council, supervisors, and legislators, and sometimes we get congresswomen there also. But the young girls are chosen by the school, and usually we have 40, 50, 60 girls, and it's an in-school field trip for that day for the girls. But the girls get to sit at a table of maybe 5 or 6 of them, and they get to talk to 3 different elected women during that day, and later they get to plan a campaign, and each table chooses someone to run for the Senate from Arizona, and then they get to make speeches and vote on who they would elect. So it gives them an opportunity to talk to people who are in real offices, who govern big budgets. We have a number of people who have come year after year, and we keep doing it, and high schools seem to be happy to have us come. In fact, invite us back, but we cannot always go back the next year. We try to spread this around. This has really started in New Jersey for students that were probably in low-income areas. We have spread it around through the various school systems here in Tucson. So some of them we have been back to, but it's, to give an opportunity for young girls to think that they might get on commissions, they might run for office, they may not do it next year, but they may do it in 10 or 20 years.
Such a terrific project. Sally's been involved in moderator training and also candidate forums. Do you have any stories about that?
Yes, I think everybody understands that the League of Women Voters is involved in candidate forums or debates. I'm not sure if most of the country remembers that the League of Women Voters used to run the final presidential campaign debate, and that's where we got our visibility. People are surprised sometimes. Older people are surprised sometimes. Here we don't do that anymore. But so this is a kind of a traditional function of the league, and it seems to be a pretty straightforward thing. And to be honest with you, I think the League of Women Voters is not always known for the jazziest presentation in candidates forums, but and we think it's pretty straightforward. You put candidates up like this, and you ask them questions, and you go home, and you've seen them, and you see how they react to maybe questions they're not quite so sure about. But it is anything but straightforward, and this is what disturbed and the parties at the national level about the league. The league insists on nonpartisan rules and operations, and the parties, this is high stakes stuff to have their candidates at a debate. They're very interested in making, each of the parties is very interested in making their candidates look favorable. We all know horror stories about some candidates who didn't look so good and lost elections on the basis of TV debates. But I think that people should understand that the League of Women Voters runs candidates, and they are trusted to do so even today, most of the time, because they are not biased in any way, sometimes, but that is not an easy thing to do. To not show bias in a political situation. Everybody is looking to see, is my candidate seated properly? Does his sign, is that bigger or smaller? Do they not look at that candidate? The moderator is not looking at some candidates when they're talking and others. It is just really a difficult thing to see when you're in the league. That's why I think we're kind of traditional, straightforward. We do it by the book, because if you let up a little bit and get jazzy, and you're going to get candidate supporters to think you're using favoritism. Now, so we came up, the League of Women Voters, and I should say another thing too, the League got so many requests to do candidate forums for local candidates too, because we're not doing the national debate anymore. And we, lots of organizations like the Arts Council and all that, they are very interested in what that candidate thinks about their issues. Okay, so we said, we don't have to do all the forums, so let's train other organizations, associations, to run candidates forums. And they really loved it. We got a lot of interest in this. So we were running, we had read workshops, how to moderate a forum, and how to organize and put on a candidates forum. And we had great sessions of, we were telling them, look, you may not have to be nonpartisan like we do, but if you aren't nonpartisan, you're not going to get candidates to come back to you, so you should be following these rules too if you want to put on candidates forum. We did it for our own people. We trained our own moderators, and we trained moderators to go into other organizations and run their own candidates forums. And on the moderator training, it was quite interesting because we had a lot of role playing. Said, okay, if you're interested in being a moderator, come up here and you try it. Okay. And then we had a discussion amongst the audience. Were they not part of They found out that they had a difficult time appearing to not favor one side or the other. You know, they would say, well, we noticed that when you looked down the table at the right, you were always looking at what they were saying. When you looked, you never looked to the left. You know, and people notice things like that. Or you have to control your gestures and your facial expressions. People say something you really don't agree with. Can't be going. And those little things, body language, everything. We had a great time in those role plays, and people had no idea how they were giving away their own preferences. So those were great. And we also have a lot more organizations, I think, giving their own forums for candidates, and they had experience. I think they came to us because they had experience saying this was a disaster. We had a candidates forum and they never come back, and so we were playing a role there too.
Tell them about your forum. They interrupted.
Oh, the forum from hell.
Yeah. You want to go ahead with that one, or you can save it for later?
This was on bilingual education and whether we should have it in the state of Arizona. And I don't know if you remember that time. I think it was a proposition. I can't really. It was actually an issue forum. We had pro bilingual and those who preferred not, to go have straight English. And this was a really passionate issue at the time. And we have a rule that you cannot wear any t-shirts or buttons or hats or anything showing your side, showing your candidate, if it's a candidate's forum, or showing the side of an issue. And so we had a huge group coming with t-shirts that had big, bilingual education is the best way to go, blah, blah, blah. And we didn't know what to do because we didn't, they were not, we asked them to take the t-shirts off. We asked them to turn their t-shirts around, and which they did. But during the issue forum, they were screaming and yelling. It's very tricky to run one of these things. It's a rally, basically. People who show up at forums are supporters of one side or the other of an issue, or one candidate side or the other. And they're there to make their candidate look good. So you have to really be... This was difficult. Not only that, 300 people showed up. 300, I think I said 600, but I don't think we've ever had 600 people in a forum. But the mic went out. Okay. Now, see, all the sensitive things about a forum, I don't even cover the technical blips. And so there are lots of things that can happen, and we go through this in the workshop, like what happens if your mic goes out, or what happens if the lights go off, or what happens if one candidate wants to go to the job in the middle of the forum, and how are you going to make that transition? Because he or she, when they come back, they'll probably say, okay, I get equal time. So all of these things, and you got it, it just seems so straightforward. I love those sessions. Anybody wants a workshop? Do they still do?
I think we do. We still do moderator training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't say what you did from the audience yelling.
Oh, the solution? You want the solution to that particular problem?
The solution to the audience yelling.
This was my finest hour. I came out and say, okay. If you would like to scream and yell, that's fun. But we are going to dock your side those who support your side of the issue for all the time. You're wasting, because we're here not to rally, but to learn about the issue.
Good answer.
And they shut up.
Okay. One other project I wanted to get to was the Kenya Global Democracy Project.
Yes.
Yeah, that was Shirley, right?
Yes, but they both
You both
helped a
involved,
lot.
okay.
All of our members, the board at the time helped a lot. You know, when I became president, I'd been in town 1 year, 2 years, 2004. So I didn't know anyone in town or in the state really. And the league continued doing what we did well and what committees were going. Sally's committee was working on the county book, and I kept thinking, who will ever pay for that? But of course, someone did pay for it because it became quite a good presentation. But we looked at things to do, and leaders get these information from the National League, and one of my information leader sheets said that they were asking for people to apply to host a Kenyan women group on global democracy. It was a pass-through State Department grant that would be for 2 years and send 6 women to the U.S. for a year, a week in Washington and a week here. And so we applied, my board and I applied for it, and we got that grant. And so we applied in 2005, and the first Kenyan women came in 2006. And one reason I agreed to continue on as president was that the second group came in 2007. So we got a lot of people involved in this global democracy group organization, because when the women came, we had plans for them to meet with city council, to interview different supervisors. We had them stay with elected women. They stayed with Carol West. She had a couple each time. Linda Arzamanian, who was superintendent of schools, she had a couple of them each time. And Dot Boone and her husband, who had done a lot of international work, and she heads the Nature Conservancy volunteers in the West. She had them, some of them stay with her. So it became a really intensive week of going to lunches and meetings, and many of us involved with it, trying to indicate to these women that you can be involved, you can run for office. They were all leaders in either healthcare or schools in Kenya. And they were Muslim women, except for one of them. And they were in what would be the northeast area of Kenya next to Somalia. So really for the State Department, this is an anti-Muslim radicalism kind of event to show women who were in leadership in Kenya how democracy worked in the U.S. And I think we had a lot of fun doing it. We had lots of dinners, and Carol West's husband took them shopping, which they loved, I think, more than anything. They loved Target and Kohl's, and they couldn't get over that a man would do that, would take them around. So we gave them very busy days. We had them scheduled morning, lunch, and afternoon and dinner. And a lot of people got involved. And this is also beneficial to me because I met all of the people on city council and all the supervisors and also other legislators. So it was an international kind of democracy project. And I went back to Washington with them to see them off. So it was interesting. You know, something that we did, it wasn't just me. When I first became president, we had a membership book, and in the back were all of the political elected people, the city council, supervisors, etc. And then we had a legal size sheet that had all of them on. And when anyone called the league office and wanted our political list, we would send them the list. And it was a legal size piece of paper printed on both sides in light blue, which I thought was not very good. But one of our members in Green Valley had been a legislator in Washington State, and she came to me and she said, we should do a brochure. We have this in Washington in my league. And so actually with Betsy, who was a member and a TEP. I think I talked with her, and then I talked with Steve Lynn, and TEP paid for us to do the first one. The first one was 2006. It's 8 pages of elected people. This has become now what the League does, and 16-page with maps, etc. And I remember each year going to Steve Lynn and telling him what we wanted to add and how much money we wanted more. Because they did that and they continued to do that. I didn't start it. I mean, it came from one of our members, but I kept increasing it and getting the money for it. Just a little addition.
Keeps growing.
And many offices, governmental offices, people will call and say, we want to get 30 of these or 50 of these. It's almost quicker than going to the computer and looking it all up.
No, absolutely.
Can I add something about the Kenya project? Because Carol West
Yes.
and I visited, she went in 2007, I think, went back to where these women were from. And I went in 2010, I think. But I would like to say that this was a really, it was a visit basically for them to see how we operated and then for us to see how they operated and to give us a workshop on what they were doing. And these were Muslim women. It was very cool having them here because we would stop off for their prayer hour. We would open a room and they would put out their robes and pray. I mean, it was all a wonderful thing for Tucson. But I have to tell you, I'm an Africanist and I cannot resist saying how important that visit was. These are Muslim women. They're pretty savvy. I mean, we think of Muslim women as being marginalized and not politically active. But I'm telling you, their Somali culture, Somali Kenya, when they created Kenya and Somalia, they just, drew the line irrespective of where the whole ethnic group was. So they're half of Somalis in Kenya and half in Somalia. And these women are Somali women. Somali culture is a tough culture. I mean, we know about Muslims in this country, but the women are it's a tough life for them. And if they are active, they have to be strong. And I think they have been tested in the strongest cultural circumstances to be demanding about their needs as women. I mean, there's a lot of discrimination against women, but I tell you, those guys are very strong. When they did workshops for us, they would really, the workshops I was in, they'd get up and really rail against, we gotta vote, we gotta do this, and they were so angry when one of them voted once. In a constituency of 1,800, she got 18 votes. And she gave her constituency hell. I mean, it's kind of like a League of Women Voters, but it's an organization in Garissa, up north of Kenya. And she really gave them hell. She said, do you know what that means? I got 18 votes. You know what that means? It means that women are not voting for women. Now, she said, I can deal with the men. But I can't deal with. And so just us being there as Americans, that was a major. And I went with a woman from Topeka. Is it Topeka, Kansas?
Wichita, I think.
Wichita was the other League of Women Voters that went on this project. So I just thought that's as a follow-up, it might not have hit the national news here, but in Kenya, they knew Americans had come to visit their women's organization.
So let's talk now about being president. And how did that happen for each of you? And what did you do when you were president? What was it like?
You two are before me.
Yeah, why don't you go?
Well, I got a call from Jimi Kyle, who's no longer with us, but was very active in the League. And I had been working full-time, and I just stopped to take care of my husband. And she said, how would you like to be president? I said, Jean, you must really be desperate. You're in the S's already. And she said, all you have to do is conduct a few meetings and give a few speeches. Well, okay. I really didn't believe her, but anyway, it turned out that was when we were doing all those forums, and we were doing so many forums that I couldn't keep track of what was going on, which is why I sort of started handing out calendars at the board meeting to make sure we all at least knew what forums we were sponsoring. So it was a very interesting experience. I found out a lot about how you have to be a little patient. One of the things that I like about the League, we're an all-volunteer organization, and I think people forget that. And you join the League to find people who have like-minded interests, and you can always find somebody who would be interested in starting a committee or starting a group or whatever. So I can't tell you how I value my years with the League of Women Voters and some of the really wonderful people I've met.
Yeah, I'll go because I was co-president with her. She was the president and I was her member. Because at the time she was having, her husband was very ill, and she might have to, not serve at all. So I said, okay, if I promise to back you up, I will be co-president. And I actually think that's a great arrangement. Especially when you're the co. Have to do that much. But I really think, and I know Judy would probably agree, she says she has 60 days left to be president. That means she's counting the minutes. That this is a tough job. You just get a sense of how much the League does, and to put it all together and to troubleshoot and to do all that is tough. And I think maybe not a co, but an assistant president or something, so that there will be a backup who can take all the little things that come up. It isn't the major issues that are the problem, but it's when there's a leak in the ladies' room in the office or whatever. I really believe that that's a good arrangement. And basically, I was doing voter service and some other things. And Carol and I would just talk. It's comforting to have somebody there who, I might even suggest it's at the national level. What do you think? But to have a co-worker who can take some of the heat and the League is also, the presidency is to be out in the community as well as to do the work. It is not just out in the community. It is not just an honorary kind of figure out there, but there's a lot of just plain work, letters to write, people to keep in touch with, and so but I'm not a legitimate presidential figure.
That's not true. Sally had voter service, and let me tell you, she did a bang-up job, and those of you who work with her know how good she is.
But that's not president.
Yes, and you kept right on. You were doing the county book when I became president. I became president, I think, in one of those years when they were really, really looking for somebody who wasn't going to say no immediately, although I think I said no 3 or 4 times. Carol kept taking me to lunch. And I said, I've only been in town 1 year, well, 1.5 years. Finally, I think I said, I guess there's not a reason I can't do it. Only because she kept after me, and I was, not working, and therefore not as busy as I had been for previous years. I'm not sure what she told me I would have to do. There was the immediate past presidents both sort of left. So neither of them would tell me anything. And when I called, I kept calling Carol once I became president. There was hardly any money, I became president in April. I think we had a fundraising luncheon in November. We had Coach Candrea speak. He had just coached the U.S. softball team to gold in the Olympics. And he was one of the best speakers we ever had, and it turned out. But he had worked with young women, and so anything to help young women progress and succeed, we thought he would be a good speaker for our fundraiser. And then, actually before that, something I didn't know anything about, voter guides appeared at our office. Jenny McGeer was state president, and we used to do thousands of voter guides, take them to homeowners, take them to all of the official offices. And I found out I had to go and speak to everywhere or anywhere anybody asked me to speak on voter guide. My most illustrious speaking was Betsy Dukowski, sitting out there, got me to speak to her friends and group at the shanty on 4th Street. One of my first speeches on the propositions. So there I went with my propositions and my crib sheet, and we were out in the patio, and they had a microphone, and it started to rain. And we all went in the bar, and we got in the bar, and I still had a microphone, couldn't see a thing, my crib sheet or anything. And here I am, first time going over propositions, and the lights went out. I finished talking, not sure what I said. Everybody clapped, and it was over. But one thing that Sally did, and many of us ended up doing, is the propositions would be filed, and the court challenges would occur, and then we would know what was going to be on the ballot. And Jimmy, who was state president, would assign every league. At that time, we had 8 leagues. We have 5 now. We had 8 leagues. Sally always helped write the pros and cons, because we tried to write nonpartisan pros and cons, specific information on what propositions really meant. And usually they meant the opposite of what their title was. So I know that Sally often wrote on information. I wrote information. Carol wrote information. So you end up getting more committees and hoping you can get enough money. We also raised the dues when I was president, and I remember all of those discussions and the people that worked and got all the information. And I also remember that I had a number of people come to me and say, you can't raise the dues. In fact, I don't know, we're $75 a year now. I'm not sure if we raised it to that at that time. But people came and said, you can't do that because Harvey can't afford that. Now, Harvey got his 50-year pin when I was elected president, and Harvey was in charge of the mail crew that took our newsletters to the office every month to mail them, bulk mail them. And Harvey did sometimes look like he might not be able to afford it. I think many of you knew Harvey died when I was president, and he left us 4% of his estate, which was over $72,000. And that was the beginning of our endowment plan. And after he died, and I was called and told that you were in the will, I knew it was the league, not me, that was in the will. These folks said, you're in the will, I'll have to have the attorneys get to you later. So then it was a couple of years while they went through and dispersed his assets before we kept getting money. And even though I stopped being president, I seemed to be in charge of that money because his will said it had to go into endowment for educational purposes. So that meant we could not spend any of those checks that kept coming in, and everybody kept saying to me, can we spend them for this? Because we always needed money. But we have a good endowment due to the fact that Harvey and his wife had been great league workers and leaders, and I used to go with him sometimes to the bulk mail station with a newsletter because I was afraid he'd drop dead because he had had 1 or 2 heart attacks, and I thought he's carrying this big thing of mail. I could just see that Harvey would fall over and all the voters would go everywhere, all of our newsletters. Anyway, so actually he worked right up to maybe a couple of weeks before he died. It was just another little thing that happened. I was also told I had to do an annual report every year, which I did. You did an annual report of what you did, how you spent your money, everything, in case you wanted to give it to any businesses that wanted to donate money for you. I don't think we do that anymore. I don't think we ask presidents to do that. But this was also a time when we were getting money for running and winning. And we were doing it cooperatively with the two American AAUW, American Association of University Women groups, Casa Adobe and To the Sun group. And we also worked with the Political Science Department of the university. They provided facilitator graduate students for us for some time. But we asked anyone to give us money or something in kind for that program. And we used to get money from Wells Fargo and a couple of banks. They stopped doing that, but they always wanted our report, our annual report, and what our budget looked like. Our budget then was around $20,000 when I was president. There were always speeches to give on Patriots Act. They were always overseeing our education Saturday meetings. I looked back and noticed, because I have all the newsletters, of course, that we did immigration, we did border issues, we did water. We keep doing some of the same things over and over. When we did the Patriot Act, in fact, somebody came from the Attorney General's office in Washington to be on the panel. It seemed like at any time I called someone and said I was president of the League of Women Voters, they would say, what would you like, what do you want, what would you like us to do? So actually in Tucson we have a good reputation, and I really, found that a lot of people were very cooperative. There are many more things, but I think it should go to
Okay. And also, we do have cards up there. We might have time for Q&A. So if anybody has questions in your head, feel free to write them down for later. So we talked a little bit about nonpartisanship and how that's something we always strive for, and how difficult it is. We also do something called consensus whenever there's an issue that comes up that we need to take a position on. And I know Carol has a story about trying to arrive at consensus.
Well, I have a story about inviting the mayor's office to watch us arrive at consensus. Consensus is the result of what happens after we do a study. Our studies are pretty thorough. They're usually 2 years. In fact, our charter school study was 3 years. So when you finish with the study, you get everybody together and you try to reach consensus about a position. It's not a vote, and it's kind of difficult to explain. You don't really vote, but you get a consensus of the group. Well, this was about a non-political or non-partisan elections for the city, and we've been studying this for a couple of years, and I thought I was fairly confident we were all on the same page. So we were going to have a meeting, and I invited the mayor's chief of staff and his executive secretary to come and watch us do this wonderful consensus process. And, well, needless to say, things didn't go as planned. And it turns out there were a couple people who were adamantly against having nonpartisan elections at the city level. I had no idea about that. I don't know where they'd been during our study. But anyway, we didn't reach consensus, and I remember that mayor's chief of staff coming up to me and saying, "Is this how that process always works?" So I learned a big lesson.
I say that I remember that too, but I think that was cool, because if we can't come to consensus, then we don't.
And you don't have a
Then we
position.
don't have a position, and the individuals can take their own positions and do with it what they will. But I think that it's too bad that's all we saw. But I just wondered if we ever couldn't agree on something, and I was happy to see that that was true, that there was enough of a diverse opinion in the league. I think that's great.
Presidents always go to national conventions and state conventions, and actually I became president in April, and in June I was in Washington at the national convention with Carol. She didn't go with me since I was such a newbie kind of person. But one thing I wanted to say about national conventions, not that one, but in the next 4 conventions, I ran a workshop on running and winning, in which any of the attendees there could come and learn how to put on a workshop. And we did a DVD that we sold them, and the New Jersey League did a binder that they sold. This is back when we used more paper, okay? But the DVD went through how you could put on a workshop, what you had to do to plan to do it. So I was always in the wares tables area with a computer showing the DVD and having people sign up. We sent them the DVD afterwards, but I did that in three successive conventions, national conventions. You want to say anything about that first convention we went to? In Washington, the Chinese.
Well, there were lots of things going on in that convention. We went to visit we went to visit our congressman, we went to visit our senator. What else did we do?
Well, we always do that when we're in Washington. And we did that when I was state president. We did the same thing.
When we walked in, we were trying to decide what to do or whatever, and you have to have badges and everything. And I said, well, that's no problem. I walked over to the desk and I said, we're from the League of Women Voters. And they immediately
In the tunnels. She said that, and so we could get through a gate. They just wrote us passes.
Yeah.
Like we needed to be there.
The national conventions are something worth going to. You get to meet leaguers from all over the country, and it just gives you a different perspective. I highly recommend it to people if they'd like to get more involved in the league.
So you were talking a little bit before about our image in the community and what people think of us. And another aspect of that is there's a stereotype about, who is a league member? What kind of person are they? Did you ever run across this and what people imagine we are?
We've talked over this a little bit. She wants us to say we were known as the rich bitches from the hills. But I'm not going to say that.
There was another term.
And I lived in the Far East, but in the town.
Oh, the League of Women Vultures.
Oh, the League of Women Vultures. That was it. But I think that the league has, there's no question the league has a reputation. But I think we're highly respected because we're kind of straight and not too diverse and, well, I won't say that. We tried. I think that's one thing we haven't talked about. When all of us were presidents here, we really made a big effort to become more diverse in our membership. And I throw in also, because we have a reputation, because we're very interested in government, being on the liberal side. And we have the reputation, and that saddens me the most, because that's what we're all about, is to get together the consensus process, and that goes into, we're trying to work, to get more diverse membership. I have one story to tell about Jimi Kyle. I don't know if you remember her, but Jimi and I got together. She has since died. And said, we really have to get from the other party that doesn't seem so represented, we have to get people who are conservative. That's the league. That's what we're all about, is different viewpoints and trying to work through everything together and all that. So Jimi and I contacted the head of the Republican Women's Group, and we said we would like to encourage more people to come. What can we do? We need to talk this over, especially in this day and age. And she said, we'll call the head of the Republican Women's Group. We didn't have as many then, Republicans, and there was a league member. This is how hard it is to be nonpartisan as a league member. A league member said, can I come and be part of this discussion? She was just walking by. She is no longer a member here. And we said, sure, come. So at the time there was we met in a coffee house, and we were just preliminary discussion at the time. One of our issues was the vote for DC. the DC vote. By the way, they're still fighting for that. And so the head of the women's group we were trying to work with said, well, you know, there is, our position on DC was that DC should have the vote so they can vote on measures like a state. And and that was our position, and the woman said, well, you know, there's another position. You know, the DC was not intended to have a vote. It's not in the Constitution. It should be a different district. We should not have all that wrangling over policy, whatever. Okay. And the woman who had asked to join the discussion said, well, if you really had read about this issue, if you knew what you were talking about, you wouldn't feel that way. Well, that was the end. I mean, it is so difficult for us. We know, because we're living in this age in which it is so difficult to talk across to somebody who believes a little bit differently. But that's what the League is all about. So we have to have that kind of diversity. But anyway, we did make a lot of effort to get broader membership. And that's not so easy because we do have a reputation. Let's face it, it's not easy, cross-cultural, race and all that. So we decided, and we were much more successful in doing this, is having coalitions of different members, different organizations. And we did do a lot of candidates forums. We had Grady Scott, who is the minister of the African American Church in on the South Side. We had Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, who did a lot of their own candidates forums, that they did workshops with forums with us. We had, who else did we have? We had relationship with Muslim women, the Noor Association, and I think it's broader than the Noor women, Muslim women. So we really made an effort, but it's a struggle all the time, and you got to do all that regular stuff you're doing all the time. But I don't think we should lose sight of that. We have a diversity committee now, still working on these kinds of things, and we try different things and see if we can make a difference.
Yeah, we have a diversity meeting on Monday night, if anybody wants to go.
Carol also put me on a consolidated government committee that she was on immediately, and we were meeting in Mayor Walkuph's office, which was an interesting group of people from different parts of Tucson's government and the county government. And we worked for some time and finally had a lunch and speaker. And I think I had 14 meetings with that committee. It was a great many meetings. And of course, determined at the end that it wasn't feasible to consolidate government completely here in the county with all of the cities and suburban cities. There was too much differences, but it did take up a lot of time, and plus there was we had one big meeting in which the city had both mayor and what was our city government? What was he called? The city manager? Was it just city manager? We had several city managers there and had a kind of panel on that, which I moderated. I just remember one person from the audience yelling out, "If we do that, no taxes." And I said, "Then you have no police, no government." Well, I wasn't supposed to be talking, I was just moderating.
Yes.
So I violated one of our norms on that. But there was a lot of discussion and a lot of meeting related to that, and then it sort of ended, and we still have the PINA Council, of governments, which does get together and is different. But I remember from many of the committee studies, from Education Committee and from ones looking at government, as Carol says, sometimes it's difficult to get to consensus. Very difficult to get to consensus. But you learn a lot about people who are in charge in different areas of the government and in business, because we sometimes have them in our meetings, in schools, principals.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up with maybe a final one? What do you see as the biggest challenge facing the league going forward?
I think the biggest challenge is that people are really busy, that with social media and all kinds of information available instantaneously, belonging to an organization where you really do have to put in time and get involved. A league study is I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful thing to be involved in, but it takes time and energy. And I just think the pace of our society is a big problem right now.
Well, I could just agree with you, because I think transitioning to all kinds of digital communication, which we try to do, is part of a challenge. And then I think that people are very busy, and they're busy with all kinds of digital communication, and whether they want to stop and maybe take a more serious look at what they might do, I don't know. A lot of people are energized now. They want to register voters, but the thing is, you have to get people to go to the polls. You have to try to stop suppressing voting. I mean, we have every year we have bills in the legislature which will slow down or stop people from voting, or make them disengaged, because it seems like it's so difficult. I mean, this crazy thing of, if you don't mail in your ballot, that you can't drop it off on election day, because it causes more problems of verifying it. That just means if somebody doesn't mail in their ballot and that becomes a law, they'll say, well, I can't drop it off, so I'm not voting. Why should I vote? There's constant at all levels, state and national level, to try to stop people from voting by different groups. And I think one of the main difficult things that we have to keep working on is to try to counter that, and try to get people to counter that and want good government, as Sally says. Good government should have everybody voting that is a citizen. So I see, it's not something new in a way. I think it's been a continual kind of process of people wanting to stop voting and to limit voting and to limit your ability to run for office. And maybe I should just say money maybe is the biggest problem. It takes so much money to effectively run for office. And I don't think that we can do a lot about that, but I see that as a real problem in trying to continue to get people, thinking people to run for office, and get people to go and actually vote, cast their ballot. I mean, it's difficult. We do it on a Tuesday, not a weekend, and we keep having our legislators through all the states enacting ways to stop us. And that's something that is our, main kind of thing to oppose. The league was very important in the Independent Redistricting Commission, getting that commission going, and getting merit judges going. And almost every year in our legislature, we have people that want to limit those groups, stop those groups, challenge those groups. I mean, the Arizona League of Women Voters has been to the U.S. Supreme Court twice in an amicus brief upholding the Independent Redistricting Commission. So I think we have to keep working and keep people involved, but I think we have a lot of challenges out there, plus the communication changes are challenges.
I think that the League of Women Voters, the function of the League of Women Voters is to make democracy work, and that's gotten harder. It's not so much that I don't focus on, how the League can do that better, but the job is harder, I think. Civility, the political divisions. And I just think that, what has caught up with us is that I think this country really doesn't understand what democracy is in an imperfect world. And getting along with people you disagree with, and the fact that people will always disagree. I mean, we look at civics in our schools. I'm sad about this. I used to teach this stuff. I'm sad about what I used to teach. And I don't think people here understand. And I also feel sorry for folks that we're trying to help voter education, because the thing that worries me is that in this complicated world, the elections and the ballots are getting so much more complicated. Do you really understand all those issues? I mean, we live in Arizona, and thank God it's not California with how many initiatives and propositions in elections. Those things are difficult to really understand. Judges, do we really understand judges? Do we know who we're voting for? And do we understand who these candidates really are? It is so complicated, and I think people do just kind of give up and say, well, it won't matter anyway, because I don't know what can change. So I just feel the function has gotten tougher, and we are getting more important, and I hope we can live up to that. I know we need more money, we need more time, and all of that stuff, but I think the toughest thing for us is just that job is almost impossible to do. So we just have to, but that's why I love the League. We're sloggers. We just keep slogging along, and my husband used to say, but Sally, this is, 5 people show up to a candidate's forum. I don't care. We're there. We're out there. People know what we're trying to do. But maybe I just hope we're not going backwards.
It's a follow-up question about running and winning, and that is, have you heard back from any of these students later and what they've gone on to do?
We have some. We have once in a while. I think Carol West has heard once or twice of students that were working in city council people's offices. Once or twice I have heard from someone. I doubt that we will really usually hear. I know that there were 2 different girls that were on commissions, got on city commissions. They applied to get on them because they had gotten excited. That's really hard follow-up, because most of them are not probably going to do much action right away. We had one that did a week's intern with Gabby Giffords when she was in the House, and that's something that we planned, and she really enjoyed that. But it's hard to keep with them, to keep them going. We also have to participate in some of these other things. Sally mentioned the judges. I did apply and was appointed to the Judicial Performance Review Commission on the judges. And the judges are vetted by one commission and names given to the governor, and the governor chooses. So that's according to the law. And then every 2 years, judges are vetted by the commission. They hire a group to do it. It's done anonymously by numbers. So the commission does get information on the judges whose names go on the ballot, and they recommend them or not recommend them. And most are recommended. I know the Performance Commission recommended a no vote once, and people voted the person in. And I know another time when they recommended a no vote and the person resigned or retired rather than stand, had his name be there for retention. But those are, and there are conferences that the commission divides up and has conferences with all of them. and goes through what their ratings were. So they really are very carefully looked at, the judges who go on the ballot. But of course, everybody doesn't know that, and that's hard to impart. And it's something the League had fought for that amendment, constitutional amendment that made the Performance Review Commission. And we've always had League members on, usually 2 or 3 from Maricopa. We do have someone on from Yavapai right now. I don't think anybody from Pima. And the commission has more lay people than lawyers and judges together. It's made up of lawyers, judges, and lay or public people. I was a public Pima person. And my seat actually went to Pinal County when they got enough members after the last census that their judges had to go under merit selection. Actually, this last election, Coconino voted to go into merit selection, even though they didn't have enough members to automatically do it. A county can vote. So Maricopa, Pima, Pinal, and Coconino now are under merit selection. And probably Yavapai after the next census will, otherwise those judges, Superior Court judges, are out there campaigning to run. And where they get their money to campaign is always a suspect.
Okay, I think we have one last question. This comes from Rex Graham, came up with this one. So did the League change you, or did you change the League?
Or both. Probably a little of both, actually. You become very involved in the community, for sure. And I don't know what kind of influence I had on the League. I have no idea.
I'm sure it's a little of both. I don't know if it changed me. I was always interested in government and politics and judicial renderings. So I'm not sure if it changed me much. And I don't know whether I changed the League any or not.
The League changed me. And I'll tell you why, because if you start working for the League and you're active, I have the time to be active, you get to know your community. You get to know the people in the community, that is, and they will open their doors to you because the League has a good reputation. You're not going to use them in any way that they don't like. But I think it's given me incredible opportunities to be a voice out there. I think the League, I encourage any of you out there to join. You can do as little or as much as you want to do, I think, and I hope that the League makes it easier to do that. So yeah, it'll change you.
Because it changed us all if we got to know a lot more people in Tucson and the state.
Yeah, that's true.
It changed us in that way. Put us a lot more knowledge. Gave us a lot more knowledge.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I think we will conclude there. I want to thank all of our panelists. They've been really wonderful and told us really wonderful stories. And I also want to thank the 2020 Celebration Committee who has helped out with this and made it happen. And that includes Kaylee Van Campen, Nancy DeFeo, Rex Graham, Susan Black, and Sue DeArmond. And also, of course, Judy Wood, our president, who came up with this idea in the first place. So thank you, Judy. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.